I'm Dave Beck, and I'm going to be talking about data science opportunities in chemical engineering and at the University of Washington writ large. I'm a faculty member in chemical engineering, and I'm also Director of Research and Education for the University of Washington Data Science Institute, the eScience Institute. In the last decade, nearly every discipline on a university campus has transitioned from data poor to data rich. And I have a few examples up here to kind of make this more concrete. In astronomy, the LSST, now called the Rubin Observatory, will come online in about a year and will generate 20 terabytes of data every night from a camera that's pointed up at the sky, taking high resolution images of the night sky. In physics, there's a Large Hadron Collider that generates so much data that they can't possibly save it. In fact, they throw out some 99% of those data and just try to capture the interesting events that are happening. In oceanography off the coast of Seattle, actually off the coast of where the University of Washington is, there's the Oceanographic Observatories Initiative, or OOI, that has sensors, a huge sensor network all over the Pacific Ocean that's sending back real-time video, that's sending back ocean condition information like salinity and oxygen, and essentially conducting a large-scale longitudinal survey of our Pacific Ocean. And all of this data come to the University of Washington. In sociology, Twitter and things like Twitter have been a huge boon for sociologists who now can look and understand things about social networks. And there's something like 1 billion tweets every day, and most of them are actually contain some kind of information. In biology, and actually this certainly touches on chemical engineering, genome sequencing has radically changed what we can do in terms of studying biology, and genome sequencers are really good at generating a lot of data. In economics, point of sale terminals, there's 9 million point of sale terminals sold every year, and every single one of those is effectively connected to the internet, and they know exactly the items that we purchase. And then finally, as a last example, in neuroscience, you have machines like the functional MRI machines that I'm showing you here, and you can monitor in real time things like the blood flow and the electrical interactions in neurons in your brain. And you can see what happens when you do things like play jazz to someone and watch their brain respond to that. So these are some of the examples of how disciplines are being changed by the availability of data that we have. Chemical engineering is not an exception. In fact, on the University of Washington campus, we were really driving a lot of the data-intensive research adoption. Examples of that include, broadly in chemical engineering, robotic high-throughput instrumentation. And these, I'm showing you here a TCAN machine. There are many different ones of these, and now they're becoming commodity. Basing them on 3D printer platform frames can really drive down the price of this robotic instrumentation. And so an instrument like this, which can be used for parallel high throughput solution phase synthesis for combinatorial chemistry and characterization, can sample thousands and thousands of compounds and characterize them in a matter of hours or days. Something that would have taken an army of folks with pipettes and weeks or months or even years to do previously. So robots are one way that we're able to generate an awful lot of data in chemical engineering very quickly. Another example that I use frequently is from Elizabeth Nance's group here in the University of Washington Chemical Engineering Department. One of the things the Nance group does is understand nanoparticle behavior in physiological environments. And this has implications for delivery of therapeutics. And so they have an instrument like this one here that is a high resolution microscope and video camera. And in addition to taking static two-dimensional images, they can recreate three-dimensional cross sections of tissues. But perhaps more importantly, they can use videos and do video capture to understand the dynamics of nanoparticles, in this case, pegylated nanoparticles, in different tissue sections, different regions of the brain. And so by analyzing many frames and the movies themselves, which are very large on the orders of terabytes, they can actually calculate the mean square displacement of different nanoparticles, and then understand how different decorations that are placed on those nanoparticles impact the ability of those nanoparticles to diffuse in certain regions of the brain or other parts of the body. So those are two sort of experimental data drivers out there. I want to give you an example from the computational side. So in chemical engineering, many of us do molecular simulation, and that might come as traditional classical molecular mechanics or types of quantum mechanics or semi-empirical methods. And that has been a huge, the exponential decline in computing costs has been a huge benefit for us doing those kinds of simulations. And so what would have cost 145 billion for a gigaflop, that is 10 to the 9th floating point operations per second. If you could do that in 1960, which you couldn't on the planet, it would have cost you $145 billion. Comparatively, today, my cell phone can do something like that, and it cost me about 3 cents. So our ability to do computation, generally speaking, has really rapidly accelerated. Moreover, and what that effectively allows us to do is run bigger and more and longer molecular simulations. So I'm going to take some examples from molecular dynamics. This is a billion atom supercooled iron conglomerate, and a billion with a B. And they were able to simulate this long enough to understand for 2000 picoseconds to understand how, as the iron cooled, little particulates and crystals formed within the mass of iron. This is some work that I did a few years ago, where we ran simulations of thousands of proteins in their native wild type and in unfolding trajectories. These are molecular mechanics, molecular dynamics simulations. And once we had this huge suite, this 400 terabytes of molecular simulation data, we were able to actually use the simulations themselves to fill in gaps in crystal structures of proteins. So we had a whole bunch of molecular configurations of proteins, and we could use all of those different configurations to search for ones that would fill in gaps that were, say, missing density in a NMR structure or a crystal structure. This is some work from the Fentner group here at the University of Washington in chemical engineering. And what they did in this work was run molecular simulations long enough that they could actually see where the binding sites were, where the interaction sites were on the surface of a protein. So we can ask very complex questions about very complex systems when we have access to high throughput compute. So another one that I'm particularly partial to is gene sequencers. And this has really revolutionized what we can do with synthetic and systems biology. You have machines like the Illumina HiSeq, which can generate, that number is actually probably a little bit dated, 10 to the 10 bases of sequencing data per day. That's just a tremendous amount of information. That's many, many human genomes or microbial genomes a day. These tend to be small snippets of DNA. If you want to sacrifice a little bit of throughput and get longer sequences of DNA, you can use one of these PacBio machines. So the Illumina machine, it sits on a desk. It's, you know, the size of a toaster oven. This one I could sit and lean my arm on. It's a pretty giant machine. Both of these are really exciting devices for generating high throughput sequence data. But there's other kinds of sequencers out there. This is the MinION. It's a few $1,000s, and it plugs into the USB port of your computer. And it doesn't generate necessarily the same volume of data as these other sequencing technologies over here. But the idea of this is that you could put one in every research lab on campus that was doing something with biology, right? These are so inexpensive. If you have a clean enough garage, you could probably run one in your own garage. So, you know, where these are about generating a lot of data, this is about democratizing the data generation process, which has the effect of generating a lot of data. Just to sort of emphasize this, this is a figure from the National Institutes of Health talking about the cost of a human genome. And so when I got started roughly 20 some years ago in science, that first human genome cost about $100 million to get. Now, in 2021, we can do this for about $1,000. I can sequence a new microbial genome if there's a bacteria that I'm interested that uses methane, for example, as its primary carbon and energy source. I can sequence that for a few $100s. So tremendous amount of data that are coming off gene sequencers, for example. And then what I want to close with in terms of chemical engineering being an example of data generators is the idea that in fabrication plants and manufacturing facilities, All of these are exquisitely instrumented. Nearly every device has its own instrumentation. And very, very many of those are connected to the internet. They have some kind of IoT component. And so that massive amount of data that's coming off a manufacturing facility or fabrication facility is available to us as process engineers to study and understand and optimize the production capabilities of that facility. And a great example of this is EU's public-private partnership, RECOBA, which was led by BASF. And among other things, they have built models that allow a plant to seamlessly transition from producing, say, one product of soap to another product of soap, while the tail end of one production is still on the assembly line. So really sophisticated things that are being done in our manufacturing and fabrication facilities that are generating a ton of data. So again, chemical engineering is a leading field in terms of data generation because of the breadth of the things that we do as chemical engineers. And all of these data have really caused what's been called a paradigm shift in how we do science and engineering and discovery. And so if you put, if you think about how it was done hundreds of years ago, and it was largely empirical and experimental. That is, the idea that this little girl would put her hand on a Van de Graaff generator and she would see her hair go out, and trying to understand how that happened or why that happened would be done through experiment and empiricism. Incidentally, this is me without a Van de Graaff generator, and that's me with a Van de Graaff generator. And if I wanted to know why her hair does that and my hair doesn't, I can go about answering that through empiricism and experiment. I can also go and generate a theoretical model of what happens. So this is sort of the next phase in discovery that followed experiment, was this theory and creating models, mathematical models of how processes happen. And once you have a mathematical model, then you can create a computational model, right? You set those equations alive through, say, for example, the classical Newtonian equations of motion, or in the case of molecular dynamics. But we have moved somewhat beyond the computational now, in that we have this data-intensive way of generating our information and studying a problem. And what the data-intensive approach is to say, like, look, let's go and collect information about all the people who have touched Van de Graaff generators and what happens to them. And if we do that enough, it's pretty quickly evident that the reason that my hair doesn't stand up when I touch a Van de Graaff generator is I don't have hair and haven't had hair for 20 years. My point of this is to say is that all of these data coming in as chemical engineers have changed the way that we can do science, engineering, and discovery. So what is making this possible? Well, there's two things really. There's the deep domain knowledge, right, that we have as chemical engineers, including things like transport and thermo and StatMech and quantum, right? Our deep understanding of molecules and chemistry. And the other piece that makes this possible is data science. And if we look at what makes up data science, at the University of Washington about 12 years ago, when the eScience Institute was formed, we got together and said, what is this thing that data science wasn't a term back then, but what is this thing that will end up becoming data science? And we decided that really it was built around 5 things. So data management is the first one. In other words, if I have a lot of data, I have to actually store those data somehow. I have to curate those data, and I have to provide scalable data handling for the instrumentation, the data coming off my instrumentation. The thing that everybody thinks of when they think of data science, of course, is machine learning. And that's a strong, important component in this. And when we think about machine learning, there's regression and classification. There's also reinforcement learning out there, or supervised or unsupervised learning. But in addition, statistics, right? Understanding that not everything is a normal distribution, and that there are other distributions that are really important, like my favorite, the negative binomial distribution. Is an important concept. And visualization. How do you communicate information about hundreds of terabytes of data that you collected? How do you communicate that succinctly to your peers, to your peer reviewers? And so visualization is an important skill that makes up the data science toolbox. And then finally, one of the ones that I'm very passionate about is software engineering. we can't just expect people to pick up programming in their own time and assume that what they will return as the product of that will be high quality code. So embracing, as engineers we do, the application of engineering concepts to our software is an important piece, and that's the concept of software engineering. So all of this comes together in the form of, and particularly in chemical engineering, of something that we call, or I call, molecular data scientists, right? So for example, somebody that knows thermodynamics and machine learning. And I have this sort of as a joke, as a unicorn, because unicorns are mythical creatures that don't exist, but molecular data scientists do exist. And we turn out many of them every year in our chemical engineering department. How do we do that? Well, we have a couple of ways to engage in data science in the chemical engineering department. The first one is through an option that we put on the books in 2013. And what this is it essentially is a degree option, I'm showing you here, a tag onto your degree. So you can get a PhD in chemical engineering with the advanced data science option. And in order to get this advanced data science option, you have to take 3 out of 4 classes. One is a database class in the computer science and engineering, the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington. Another is a machine learning class, either there actually or in stats. And then, or a stats level, a grad level statistics class in the stats department. And then there are a number of options for visualization classes. And again, it's a subset of these that you have to take, and we reserve slots in those classes for our PhD students who are going to get this option. It's a lot of work, but it's tremendously valuable when you get the option. It's a strong signal to potential employers, but also it's an enabling thing in your research. I am really proud to say that in 2015, the University of Washington graduated the first advanced data science option student, and that student was a chemical engineering student. And she's now working as a data scientist for a well-funded metabolic engineering startup. More recently in 2016, we created within the chemical engineering department a set of molecular data science courses. So unlike the ones that I just described that are taught in the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science or the statistics department or other departments, what we did in 2016 was really to internalize a data science option in chemical engineering. And this allowed us to focus the coursework on things that we know well, molecules, and to really contextualize the data science education within the kinds of things that we do as chemical engineers. And so you can see here, our mission was to build a broadly accessible data science education environment focused on the molecular sciences. And this was initially funded by the NSF. This has a strong interface with the Clean Energy Institute and also the eScience Institute, again, the University of Washington's Data Science Institute that I'm part of. So this program is called DIRECT. And the goal of the DIRECT program is to essentially educate our students with fluency in data science. And so the advanced data science option, there the intent is to teach you, say, how to write a machine learning algorithm from scratch. With the DIRECT approach, our intent is not to teach you how to write a machine learning algorithm from scratch, but instead to teach you how to use machine learning algorithms that exist out here. So let me make this a little bit more explicit. Our intent is to have the students become fluent in data science methods, best practices, and tool developments. So for example, how to choose a neural network architecture, whether it's a feed-forward artificial neural network, or a recurrent neural network, or a convolutional neural network, to know what those are, how they're different from each other, and how to select the appropriate one for your particular task. But not teach you how to derive from scratch a variable learning rate optimizer, right? If you want that, that's great, go do the advanced option. We teach you how to use database query languages, but not how to build query planners, right? That's kind of, again, the domain of computer scientists and folks that do the advanced option. We teach you how to write software using test-driven development, perform code reviews, how to interact and collaborate around code, how to write code that has the same level of professionalism as a manuscript or a publication or a patent, right? We want to elevate software in the chemical engineering setting to be on the same level as a publication or a patent. But not to teach you how to write your own compiler. Again, that's the domain of the advanced data science option and computer science department. So with direct, you can still get the degree option. It's the PhD in chemical engineering with the data science option. And ultimately, it boils down to roughly 3 classes. ChemE 546, one of my favorite classes to teach, software engineering for molecular data scientists, that occurs in the winter quarter. And then ChemE 545, data science methods for clean energy research. This name reflects the origin of the program and the collaboration with the Clean Energy Institute, but 545 is no longer just linked to clean energy. It now includes clean energy, but it also includes things from environment and health, basically anywhere that molecules exist, because this is a molecular data science program. Those are topical areas that we cover. And then in the spring, to do what's called our capstone, a molecular data science capstone. And this is an opportunity to work with faculty from the university, folks from national labs, from non-governmental organizations, and actual companies that sponsor our capstone projects. And I'll show you some examples of these. So again, with the goal of teaching fluency, another goal was to have no prerequisites. So we assume that you have no prior computing experience. If you do, that's great. I guarantee you will learn new things. If you don't, that's awesome. We're prepared to teach you from scratch. It's a pretty intensive program. In 6 months, you take those 3 courses. So that's 2 quarters. We're on the quarter system at the University of Washington. So that's about a 6-month program, and it's pretty intensive. We will spend a lot of time with you in those 6 months. And it's all project-based. And what we do is we use those projects to teach those 5 things that I described to you earlier that have been defined as data science on the University of Washington campus. And having this university-wide consistent vision about data science really creates, leverage to the eScience Institute, really creates a much bigger community than just the chemical engineering department. We're a large, welcoming community in chemical engineering, but the whole university has the same vision of data science. And so you can go into any other department or any other unit and find like-minded folks who embrace these 5 things as data science. We use these innovative classrooms, the active learning classrooms, to teach these courses. And these are really great classrooms to teach in because the students have their own tables. They each have their own display. And as the instructor, I can project my display out to the tables, and the students can use that for their own display and project back. And so it's really a great collaborative, active learning setting. So let me give you some examples that came from the class projects and the capstones. So this is a team that had was using a gasification reactor that had an in situ Raman probe. And what they wanted to do was monitor the molecular species present in the reactor instantaneously. And in order to do this, they created a machine learning algorithm that they trained on individual molecular species, so the Raman spectra for individual molecular species. And then they used that machine learning algorithm to feed it real-time data coming off the gasification reactor. And using that, they could predict which species were present in the reactor at any one time. This is another team that created a tool to predict the excitation and emission spectra for dyes, in particular conjugated organic molecules. This was a scarily good piece of software. And so during the review of it, I went up and they built a GUI. You can sort of see it here. I went up and I put a molecule that I knew wasn't in the training data set. I put a molecule that I knew from biology that we use for staining cells. in there, and they nailed it. Their prediction was bang on for both the excitation and emission spectra. So another class project. This is a class project in a capstone that was done. This is a tool for identifying retrosynthetic pathways for building basically new organisms to perform to make a small molecule. And what they did is they leveraged what's called enzyme promiscuity. That is, many enzymes are actually capable of carrying out reactions that are sort of not the primary reaction, right? They're promiscuous and they can work on multiple substrates, usually with a loss of reaction rate. And many of these side reactions are known. And so what the team did is they built a tool that if you said you wanted to make this small molecule, they would find you an optimal retrosynthetic pathway that you can incorporate into your organism. This is a team that was also a project and a capstone called Route Dynamics. This is a real rubber meets the road kind of project. And in this project, the team worked with Metro King County, which is our local transit agency, and we have hybrid electric buses in King County, and actually we have fully electric buses as well. And King County, Seattle, the city of Seattle is a very, very hilly place. And this is a topographic map right here where elevation is shown, higher elevations are shown in white. And you can see that there's a lot of sort of hills and elevation changes. And what the team did is they extracted out the bus routes, which is what I'm showing you with my cursor, these different routes on here. And after doing that, they could come up with the elevation changes along a bus route. So that's what I'm pointing at here. And they can actually then go and identify which parts of the routes or which routes themselves place the biggest strain on the batteries in the bus, right? So when you're going uphill, you're discharging really quickly that, the large battery packs in a heavy bus, packed with people going up a hill. And then when you're coming downhill, say in this region here, you're doing regenerative braking. So you're pushing a lot of energy back into those batteries. And both of those things cause strain. And so this is some really nice work that was done by this team. And then went on to present this. I have this, they presented it at the 2019 Electrochemical Society meeting, and also I think in the 2020 meeting as well, and has been published independently. So those are some of the kinds of projects that we engage in this project-based molecular data science program that we have in chemical engineering at the University of Washington. So what are some of the takeaways here is don't be afraid of data. Data is your friend, and having a lot of data is a good thing. And you don't have to come from a computational background to take advantage of data science. And you don't even have to be a computational person to take advantage. And my argument, my hypothesis here is that experimentalists benefit from this as well, because they become familiar with sort of the thinking about high throughput data generation and data intensive science and engineering, and how to use those robotic instrumentation to the maximum effect. So again, we assume no prior experience, and you don't need to be afraid of data. I want to spend the last minute talking about the tie to the eScience Institute. Again, we are the University of Washington's Applied Data Science Institute, and we have many ways that you can get help and support for your research. One of the examples I'm showing you here is office hours. So we have about 14 data scientists that work in the eScience Institute, and they all have office hours. And so you can find out what their sort of expertise is, and then go meet with them for an hour or something like that to get, again, support with your research, or even career advising how to become a data scientist. And again, they are all experts in the sort of those 5 things that we've decided constitute data science at the University of Washington. And we have a number of partner entities that participate in our office hours, such as companies like Tableau or Amazon Web Services and MathWorks. All right, so I hope that you swipe right for data science, and we are really excited about the molecular data science program in chemical engineering at the University of Washington. And I believe that we need more molecular data scientists because we have a lot to offer the world. And with that, I'm going to close. Have a wonderful day.